Welcome back to Crazy Good Aging, where we believe getting older should be an amazing encore, not an exit. I'm Dorothy.
And I'm Valerie.
We're your hosts and co-founders of Prime Women Media and an amazing online magazine at primewomen.com.
So today we're tackling one of the most important and most ignored health issues for women over 50, and that is hypertension and its ugly sister, heart disease. And that's the number one killer of women over the age of 50.
Yes, our guest today is Dr. Sharon Nesbitt. She is a professor at UT Southwestern and director of the Parkland Center for Hypertension. Welcome to Crazy Good Aging.
Thank you so much, Valerie. It's so nice to join you today.
Well, thanks. Well, let's start. Number one, true or false? The day we blow out 50 candles, our blood pressure starts plotting against us?
Sort of. A lot of things are changing around the time that we turn 50. But it isn't blow out the candles and, oh my goodness, everything changes. This is more of a gradual change that is happening over time. And as we age and approach menopause, the big day, many, many things are changing. The hormone levels that we have had during our childbearing years are shifting. Estradiol is going down and progesterone is coming up. And we used to say we're becoming a little more like male than female at that point. But that change is concurrent with some other vascular changes. And that actually turns into increasing risk for us for heart disease, for strokes, and other adverse events, unfortunately. They aren't all uniquely due to the hormone changes, but they all seem to happen all at the same time, converging to increase our risk for some really bad things, like what we call vascular stiffness, meaning the blood vessels are getting stiffer. And I like to describe it the same way as you think of a rubber band in your kitchen drawer, is if you leave that rubber band there for a long time and you try to stretch it out, it's no longer rubbery. It's a little harder and stiffer, and the longer it stays, the harder it gets. That's really akin to what happens to our blood vessels, which is obviously not great for our blood pressure. It's not great for our hearts, not great for our brains either. So we have to do some things to counteract that.
Fantastic. So here we are. We turned 50. We've now got night sweats, hot flashes, and we can add, potential hypertension to it. So why does high blood pressure creep up on us after 50?
Yeah, it creeps up because we're aging at the same time as we're becoming, we're going through menopause. These blood vessel changes are shifting on us underneath that. But at the same time, the change in hormones also affects your cholesterol levels, which is, important in thinking of atherosclerosis, which is cholesterol sort of depositing in the blood vessels and making them again stiffer, increasing the risk. We gain a little more weight, unfortunately, in the wrong places. We tend to shift that, whereas we, as younger people, we've had more of our weight harbored in the lower part of the body, but now it seems to congeal right in that middle and section, and that is where we describe the most metabolically active fat to occur. So these things all kind of come together. They adversely affect our risk, coupled with the fact that the hormonal changes is what causes those vasomotor effects that you referred to, the lovely hot flashes, the difficulty with sleeping and night sweats, a little bit of memory dysfunction, mood changes, not feeling so great, just not quite feeling like yourself. All of those things come at the same time, and that's sort of that tap on the shoulder that says, uh-oh, hey, you are changing, you're getting a little bit older.
Well, Dr. Nesbitt, I didn't realize, well, first it was cholesterol. My cholesterol was off the charts, and I did not find that out. I felt fine. I didn't find it out until I went to an American Heart Association meeting where they were giving everybody cholesterol tests. The woman that gave me mine said, "You have got to go to the doctor like tomorrow." It was so high. And then time went by, and I tried diet and exercise. That didn't work, so I finally said, just give me the drugs. I need to get this down. I know I do. And then my blood pressure was fine at the time. Well, now, the last, I guess, 5 years, it's been going up. And again, I went to, I was at a medical clinic, and they took my blood pressure, and they said, "You've got to have this medication right now," because it was so high. So it was really weird that all through my cholesterol and blood pressure issues, I felt fine. I never felt any different.
It is why we call it the silent killer, is that it creeps up over time, and as it increases, there may be some symptoms that are related to the blood pressure, and we have found that when we've looked at people who've had high blood pressure. We treat them, and then they suddenly say, "Oh, I feel so much better. I didn't realize I felt bad." It happens so slowly that whatever physical changes you may be having, you don't even recognize it because it's slowly occurring. On the other hand, it points out something very important that you just mentioned. One is that I work very closely with the American Heart Association, and I really love the work that they do. But it raises the importance of screening, is really having your blood pressure checked on a regular basis, and also having your cholesterol checked, particularly as we reach middle age, because these are not things that you're going to just know unless you take the test and actually follow it over time. What we do find in terms of blood pressure is that typically it isn't like turning on the faucet. It is like a drip, 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 and slowly the faucet is turning on. And so likely, if you had followed the blood pressure serially well before that, maybe even as long as 10 years, you might have seen a slow increase in the blood pressure over time to reach the point that we actually call it hypertension. And our definition now is that when the blood pressure is consistently above 130 systolic, over 80 diastolic, we call that hypertension stage 1, and thereafter there are other stages. But typically people miss that sort of just crossing it because we really aren't paying attention to it closely enough to see it happening.
Yeah, that's true. I believe that.
Yes. And we hear often about how heart disease is the number one killer, and a lot of women don't really know that, but it's also the number one killer for women over 50 too. So how does blood pressure affect that?
Well, blood pressure is the most common reason that people go to the doctors. Adults go to the doctors. And so just think about that, is that it is a very common risk factor that underlies many, many other things. It's a risk factor that really is a marker of telling you about your entire cardiovascular system. And so as it is going up, it's not just the numbers that matter. What matters is what's happening to the system. It is telling you that these blood vessels are getting stiffer, that they are less resistant. It is telling you that your heart is likely getting thicker and perhaps also stiffer, and the function is more dysfunctional. It is affecting the blood vessels in your brain, and all of those blood vessel changes that are happening in every single organ that we have limits the amount of blood supply that gets to the organ. And blood supply is what we need to nourish all of our organs to survive, most importantly, your heart and your brain. And so as you limit that by virtue of the changing blood vessels, you put your heart at risk for having a heart attack, you put your brain at risk for having a stroke, and you put your kidneys at risk actually for more dysfunction as well. So it underlies so many things, and it makes it extremely important that we're more cognizant about following it and about taking care of it when we see the number as appropriate for treatment.
okay, let's talk about turning the tables. So, what can we do about it that doesn't make us the most boring person in the world? No drinking, no salt, no fun. Is that all? Is that what we have to do?
More to life than just those things. Um, you can do. I really, yeah, I always tell patients, I don't like to be the arbiter of no fun for people. I like to help people to have better quality of life. And so as we think about, what do we love? Chocolate is lovely, but do you really need it every single day, all day? It's no longer special when it's all day, every day. So giving yourself the treats, I think, is fine. However, on an everyday basis, a healthy lifestyle is what we need. So, keeping the amount of sodium that we take in every day to being ideally less than 1,500 milligrams or at least less than 2,000 is best for you, right? That is best for keeping blood pressure on better control. If you have an occasional holiday or you're out with the girls and you're having a great time on, once a month or so, fine. Alcohol, again, for women, it's important for us to know that the amount of alcohol that's correlated with blood pressure increase is different for men and women. Has to do with the fact that our liver, which is how we metabolize alcohol, our livers are smaller. And so the capacity of the enzyme necessary to break it down is a little bit less. So whereas we tell men no more than 2 alcoholic beverages per day, for women, it's more like 1 to maybe 1.5 or so because your liver just can't handle that. And after that point, there's an inflection in the curve that blood pressure actually starts to rise, and then it becomes in and of itself a risk factor. So there's no problem with you having that one glass of wine with dinner if you enjoy that. But there is a problem with you having 3.
Okay, you brought up a really good topic, and I'm glad you did because I know, of course, you saw the reports that where drinking, they've said in any amount really was bad, bad, bad.
Yeah.
And so we have women always saying, okay, am I supposed to quit drinking? And I think a lot of people really cut it back there when that report initially came out. And then I think we all go, yeah, whatever. And we're back to drinking. So how much weight do you think we should put into that study?
So as we make recommendations from large studies, we obviously have to report the data as the data comes into us. And over time, if you look at many, many studies, you will find that they don't always show exactly the same things, and for different reasons. Sometimes it's the patient population, and sometimes it is the way the study is actually done or the data is collected. I'm not saying that this one isn't necessarily true, but what I am saying is that we have to put everything into context, is to looking at what did the study mean and who was studied, and B is the time frame, and then lastly for the healthcare professionals, we think about whatever we say, the literalness of what we say matters, so that we have to be careful that we don't say anything that, pushes people to the extreme to do something that would be more dangerous for them. On the other hand, we don't want to be so restrictive that people say, I'm not really listening to you at all. And so that said, there is a certain percentage of the population that if we recommend alcohol, we might actually be pushing them to something that's less healthy for them, right? Because they may have a greater propensity for excess use. On the other hand, there are others who would never have that problem. So we always teeter on that level when it comes to alcohol. There's not been a study that says very clearly that every individual who drinks 1 beverage a day is at great risk for more heart disease. I think we've questioned the effect of whether or not that 1 drink per day actually improves your cardiovascular health. That is what we previously have said. And so that may not necessarily be true, but whether 1 drink per day necessarily adversely affects everybody, I think is another question entirely. And so enjoying 1 glass a day would not necessarily be adversely, a problem for every individual. So I think you just have to look at all these things wisely.
Yeah. Well, we hope there's more research on the things that affect women over 50, which we know there hasn't been up to this time. But the other thing we wanted to ask you about is that, like for me, there was a long time when I prided myself on not taking any medications at all, not even an aspirin. And then, of course, when I started finding out about all these things that were wrong with me, I went ahead and after I tried some things and they didn't work, I went ahead and took the medication that the doctor prescribed. So, how do you convince your patients that are like people like me that don't want to take pills, but yet that that if they don't, something's going to happen to them short term?
Long conversation. We about this. This is a very common problem, and I don't think negatively of folks who have been living such a healthy life that they've not needed medications, and there are many people who do not need medications. But I try to give people data because I think we all need evidence to make good decisions, and ultimately the decision is yours because it's your body. One is to understand what the possibility and effects are of a healthy lifestyle, how to get there, what kind of a diet that you should be eating, and what is the possibility for that to improve your blood pressure, if that's what we're working on, or your cholesterol, if that's what we're focusing on. And also, what the effect of smoking, what the effect of how much alcohol you can take before it has a negative effect on you. And then, to talk about exercise and what's the likelihood of that, really changing the numbers. And there is a real relationship between the ability of these non-pharmacologic, what we call lifestyle changes, how they can affect the blood pressure that you have right now. So yes, they all will work. How much they can improve it is to a certain extent. And so depending on what the level of blood pressure is, for instance, if your blood pressure is at 200 over 110, while lifestyle matters a lot, you will not likely get to the goal of 130 over 80 with lifestyle alone. Similarly, if you are at 138 over 85, in that case, would not say that you need medication right away unless you've already had a cardiovascular event. You've already had a stroke, you already had a heart attack, you had a TIA. Any of those things would say you are now really high risk, and you owe it to yourself to protect yourself from having another, even at that low level as well. But I think folks that are motivated to not take medications, you may have a much stronger response because they're more likely to maintain a healthier lifestyle for longer than people who say, just give me the medications. I don't want to know anything else about how to change my life. I don't think that's the right approach either. I think we all need to be engaged in taking care of our bodies in every way, medication and lifestyle.
There's one important message I know you would like to for us to get out there, and we'd like for it to get out there, is that women of color, and particularly Black women, are at higher risk. And I'm not sure that's a very widespread known fact.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how much that excess risk is. Not only do women of color have the highest levels, prevalence of blood pressure problems in the U.S., they have also a lower life expectancy compared to non-Black individuals specifically, that they have greater likelihood of not even knowing that their blood pressures are high, and they are less likely to have blood pressure control if they know they have it and are treatment. So only about 25% of Black women who have high blood pressure actually have blood pressure under control. And adding to that and thinking about, why is that important? Because it's connected to cardiovascular outcomes. Well, what is the likelihood of having a cardiovascular event? Is the risk of having cardiovascular events for Black women is nearly twice as high as it is for non-Black women. And some of that is because the length of time at which their blood pressure has been elevated is much greater in most instances. So it starts earlier and it stays higher longer, which means those long-term effects have a greater likelihood of having an event occur in Black women than in others. And one other point I will make is something else I don't think people really understand is that this connection between maternal mortality, that is childbearing years, and high blood pressure during pregnancy. Black women have a far higher risk of having maternal death during something that should be a joyful time that's natural, more likely to die, more likely to have high blood pressure, and more likely to need to deliver babies earlier because they've had problems during the early parts of pregnancy. And that, even after the baby is delivered, increases their risk by the time they reach menopause to have a cardiovascular event, hypertension, and heart attacks and strokes as well. So there's really a call for attention to it in a very special way, and really raising awareness that early detection matters a lot.
That's a really great message, Dr. Nesbitt, and we want to make sure we get that out there to all those women that we know and love that maybe aren't aware of that. Okay, so we're going to move on to a rapid round here of true false. So let me start with I'm thin, so I guess I don't have to worry about high blood pressure.
No, ma'am. You do have to worry. Sorry. You're beautiful, but you still have to be concerned because blood pressure is not just related to overweight. Yes, has a very strong relationship with being overweight, and yes, weight loss will improve blood pressure. However, that is not a protective factor for women who are already thin. You still have an increased risk.
That's true because even when I lost a lot of weight when I was trying to lower my cholesterol through food, it didn't help. So I know. But okay, so if someone has high blood pressure and they're taking medication and they recently had lower readings, can they stop taking it, or can they stop taking the amount that they had been taking in a lower amount?
This is why you have a care provider. That is what they're there to do for you. And no, you should not, unless you actually have conversation with your care provider, because blood pressure varies every day, all day for all of us. That's a natural thing. So having one low blood pressure may not indicate that it is appropriate for you to stop your medicine or reduce the dose. But your provider will actually ask you to follow more blood pressures, maybe bring you in, and then decide whether or not changing your dose is necessary, and or whether decreasing the medicine, stopping medicine is something that you should do. But you should not do that on your own.
Okay, so I don't eat salt. I don't add salt. So that means I can pretty much eat anything else. Is that right?
No. No, again, you cannot. Moderation is a beautiful word for almost everything that we do. Is if we could stay in moderation for most things, we would be just fine. And so, excess salt obviously is not great for blood pressure. But as you point out before, is that cholesterol is also a very important risk factor. And eating a high-fat meal will likely increase cholesterol as well. And cholesterol deposition into blood vessels makes the blood vessels stiffer, more likely to have areas where there are clots that form. And that's what happens when you have a heart attack. And so a healthy diet And we really like the Mediterranean diet. So this is a diet that is high in unsaturated fats, olive oil, fresh fruits and vegetables, all of these things that are, they're delicious, I might say. But if you can adopt that diet, we find that that is a much healthier way to live.
Okay, Dr. Nesbitt. So you've been amazing, but we ask all of our guests for their prime picks. So, Valerie, what have you got for her?
Okay, what's your favorite heart-healthy snack?
Fruit smoothies. I love them. I do. And my trick is buy frozen fruit in the frozen fruit section that's cut into chunks, take it out of the freezer, put it in the blender with maybe some fresh fruit, a little water. It's a fantastic snack. You're going to get at least 2 to 3 servings of your daily 5 to 6 that you should get of fruits and vegetables. And it's fantastic. It tastes great, natural sweet. It's great. I love that.
All right. I like that. Okay, how do you de-stress?
Music has always been a great de-stressor for me. So I have lots of tunes that in the car, I love just turning the music up really loud. If I see a police car coming, the first thing I do is turn the music down because it's always loud. I like dance. And I love taking a nice hot bath because it's a great time to just close your eyes and don't think about anything else. Just relax.
And the song that gets you moving?
I'm Every Woman. Whether you like it by Shaka Khan or whether you like it by Whitney Houston, I love that song. It's one of my favorites. And anytime it comes on, it's like a motivation to move and dance immediately. Love that.
All right.
Okay, so we have some takeaways here. I'm hearing, first off, get your blood pressure checked right off. And if you haven't checked it and you're over 50, you better get your blood pressure checked. So let's do that. Get moving. Sounds like we need to continue to do exercise and all that good stuff. And also be an advocate for your health, because you have to be one, that's for sure. And particularly women of color, you've got to be an advocate. And then enjoy life, because the stress is really the killer there. Well, this has been a great episode of Crazy Good Aging. We hope you'll enjoy us again next week for a new episode. And so in the meantime, stay strong. Okay, join us for next week for another episode of Crazy Good Aging.